So I'm Erica Uszak, a Civil War Institute student fellow at Gettysburg College, and today I'm standing on top of East Cemetery Hill on the battlefield. And today I will discuss one Louisiana officer and how he interpreted the Battle of Gettysburg, and I will also touch upon the role of propaganda and newspapers in the Civil War. So just one background on this Louisiana officer. His name was Reuben Allen Pierson, and he was a slaveholder who lived in Mount Lebanon, Louisiana. He was educated at the local university and was working as a teacher when the war broke out. He came from a very wealthy slaveholding family, and he owned slaves himself. The father, William Pierson, used enslaved labor on his plantation, which profited from the sale of cotton, corn, sweet potatoes, and the sale of timber. And by 1860, William Pierson had such valuable land and property that he sold the plantation for $30,000, equivalent to almost $1 million in 2021. So, with the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, the Piersons likely worried that Lincoln, who was regarded by many Southerners as an abolitionist, would try to abolish slavery and therefore destroy their wealth and their way of life, thereby adding to Pierson's perception of Lincoln as, quote, a tyrant. So Pierson enlisted in July 1861 at age 27 in Company C of the Ninth Louisiana Infantry, which fought in Hayes Brigade with the Army of Northern Virginia in the Eastern Theater. So when he signs up, he believes that he is fighting for the defense of his family, his state, and the Confederacy. He believes that he, like the men of the American Revolution, is waging a just war for Southern independence. He argues that he is fighting against Northern tyranny and, quote, the enslavement of Southern whites. A lot of the phrases that he uses, enslavement, submission, subjugation, and tyranny, are commonplace phrases that are repeated across the South, Southern culture, and especially newspapers. And according to George Reuben, who wrote about Southern rhetoric in the Civil War, many white Southerners echoed this idea that Northerners would try to enslave the white South if they were to overcome the South. White Southerners feared that the Northerners would free their enslaved people, and then the white elite Southerners would fall to the bottom of society. So, as I was saying, Reuben Allen Pierson will be fighting on East Cemetery Hill here on July 2nd with the Ninth Louisiana. So where I'm standing right now is still on East Cemetery Hill, but the Ninth Louisiana is going to come behind me up the slope here starting the late evening on July 2nd. So the Ninth Louisiana is part of Hayes Brigade, Early's Division, Ewell's Corps in the Confederate Army. On the first day, the Ninth Louisiana is going to attack troops of the 11th Corps, U.S. 11th Corps at Barlow's Knoll, just northeast of present-day Gettysburg College campus in the late afternoon on July 1st. Eventually, U.S. troops will be forced to retreat back to the high ground here at Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge in the famous Fish Hook defensive position of the U.S. Army. Then, on July 2nd, in the late afternoon, following a Confederate artillery barrage on this position here at Cemetery Hill, the 9th Louisiana, Hayes Brigade, and Avery's Brigade are going to attack the U.S. position here that's held by the U.S. 11th Corps in the late evening hours on July 2nd, attacking here at East Cemetery Hill. They're going to try to take the Union batteries here and try to take this hill late evening, even as darkness is falling. Confederates will breach the top of the hill and start to come this way as it becomes more difficult to see the opposing enemy in the night hours as darkness falls. In one account by one Ohio soldier, as the 9th Louisiana started to fall back, the Ohio soldiers saw the 9th Louisiana flag, and they, quote, pounced on the flag as if a piece of it would be the greatest badge of bravery that they could get their hands on. And so they ripped the pieces of the 9th Louisiana flag. And then as the rest of Hayes Brigade attacks, they'll eventually get repulsed again as darkness is now upon them, and then the Confederates will be forced to fall back, especially with the arrival of more U.S. reinforcements, especially from the U.S. Second Corps from Cemetery Ridge. On July 3rd, the Ninth Louisiana will fall back into position on High Street in the downtown, and then eventually will pull out of Gettysburg early in July 4th. The total casualties for the brigade of Hayes Brigade will be killed 36, wounded 201, missing 95, so about 330 men out of about 1,200 or so. So after the disastrous defeat at Gettysburg, Pierson will still try to spin the loss in the Confederacy's favor, and he expresses confidence in Confederate leaders despite the heavy losses. In a letter written about mid-July of 1863, he claimed that the Confederates, quote, captured 20,000 prisoners of the Union Army. He misrepresented the number of prisoners, as the American Battlefield Trust estimates this number to be closer to about the number of captured total of Union and missing Union men to be about 5,300. In the next letter to his father, Pierson revised his estimates to, quote, several thousand prisoners, but then he also added, quote, their papers estimate the loss on their part, the Union part, at 30 to 50,000. Our loss will fall much short of these figures, even though the Confederate casualties will outnumber the Union. Only a month after Gettysburg, Reuben Allen affirmed that the Confederates were, quote, superior in valor. Again, there's this belief among him and many other, especially wealthy Confederates, that the Confederates are invincible, that they are superior in moral but also physical courage to the Union Army. And Confederate soldiers like Pierson often used media coverage in a way that would support their own beliefs. Pierson's spin on the news was driven by his own experiences, rumors that he had heard, anti-war Northern editorials, the Southern press, and a desire to repeat the intelligence that favored the Confederacy. Maybe he didn't always fabricate his information, but he did always estimate Union casualties to be higher than the Confederates. Although it is certain that he had access to newspapers and magazines, depending on the time and place, it seems that much of his information was derived from his own experiences, rumors, and again, Confederate newspapers that often would skew the war effort in the Confederacy's favor. So now I'm standing in front of the Louisiana State Memorial, and I'm going to wrap up Pierson's letters here. So about a month after the battle, in August 1863, he wrote to his sister, Mary Catherine Pierson, and he swore that he would, quote, would welcome death 1,000 times rather than live with to reunite with such a band of robbers, murderers, and unhuman creatures as we are now fighting. This Louisiana monument was dedicated in the early 1970s, during the Civil Rights era and desegregation. The soldier in the memorial is enshrouded in the Confederate battle flag in death, with the spirit of the Confederacy above him. Pierson believed that death for the Confederacy was glorious. In fact, only a few weeks after the battle, he vowed that, quote, most of the men of the South will die in preference to being subjugated by the merciless hordes of King Abraham, meaning Abraham Lincoln. Pierson himself would not survive the war and died in July 1864 in a small skirmish at Snicker's Gap in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He believed that this was the ultimate sacrifice to the Confederacy, and he saw himself as a Confederate man and citizen fighting for Southern freedom, although he refused to recognize the true causes of the war and that he was taking away freedom from the people that he enslaved. He remained blinded by his convictions about the Confederate cause and ultimate Confederate victory over those robbers and murderers of the North until his very end.